how would you recommend, because you're the news curator, you probably are ready to answer all of these questions at a dinner, but how should we approach discourse without getting into this emotional fight between one another where, all of a sudden everyone says, don't talk about politics, let's not discuss politics, let's not discuss anything that's beside, just small talk. And so I think also part of what you're implying is Tangle is trying to build this bridge, let's have these nuanced conversations, but in real life as well. And so how do I put this into action?
It's a really good question. I would say, first of all, some people don't want to talk about politics because they want to take a break from it. And that's okay. I don't think you should force anybody into talking about anything they don't want to talk about. I do think this stuff is important, obviously, because we write about it every day. So it's worth discussing. It's a little different for me because everybody I meet wants to talk to me about politics because it's my job. So they're very interested in hearing my perspectives about it. And I'm happy to do that. I mean, I write about this stuff because it's interesting and I think it's important. And that's why I've dedicated my career to it. I think for people who are interested in having these conversations, it's really the fundamental most important thing to do is to make it clear to people that they can share their views or perspectives without being judged really harshly. So, one thing that's really important to me is if I'm going to ask somebody a question about, what they think of the war in Ukraine or whatever, their immediate response oftentimes is going to be a little bit of apprehension, a little bit nervous, like, I don't know enough to talk about it, so I don't want to say. And I try and say things because I'm often really interested. Like, I don't care what your perspective is. I'm just very curious what your view is because I trust you. I think you're a smart person. I think it's interesting to me to hear you're somebody who's not an expert on this issue, but you read the news sometimes. And I'm very curious what your perspective is. What information makes it down to you? That is helpful for me. It's informative to me. And people generally respond well to that. They respond well to the idea that someone's interested in their opinion, that they can speak without being judged harshly. And it's okay for them to say something and maybe get it wrong or have a conversation or a little bit of a debate or an argument about it. And that, it's okay for them to change their minds too. I think that's another thing I talk about in Tangle all the time is my political views change all the time. I read something that changes my mind about an issue. And that wasn't the case 10 years ago or 8 years ago. It happened because the work of doing Tangle made me flex that muscle over and over again. And I got way better at it. And I realized it actually is totally okay to change your mind about stuff. And so I think giving people a space to move their position, even in the conversation you're having, is a good way to make them comfortable and to have sort of a productive, thoughtful conversation. And that's one of the things that's really important to me is, sometimes I change my view on something and a reader will write in and say, 6 months ago, you said this and now you're saying this. And I say, yeah, well, I read this article that really convinced me that I was wrong before. And that's okay. You don't have to stick to your position. In fact, sticking to your position, I think, is actually not a sign of wisdom. It's a sign of being stubborn and closed-minded. And if your positions aren't changing, again, you're probably not putting yourself out there and being exposed to arguments that really challenge you. So anytime, you want to talk about politics or you're trying to have that conversation, I would say it's really important to make it feel like a space where people can share their views honestly and not be judged or condemned or criticized for them. Make it an actual conversation and be interested in what people actually have to say without just doing it so you can talk about whatever your own worldviews are.
Absolutely. And I think that, switching into your perspective into real life situations that are happening across the world, especially in politics, we're right now entering every day deeper into a presidential election cycle. And, you've written about Trump versus Biden, the rematch. We've also published some very great videos on YouTube, especially I really like the one with the perfect candidate. How can we build that one? Which I would love for you to share, what would be good traits for our listeners who haven't watched that video. I'll put the link in the notes for that video as well. But Isaac, here is where the political situation gets a bit murkier, especially with the context that we're living in. And this is my perspective. I don't think a lot of us are very excited about the Trump versus Biden rematch, especially with age concerns. That's my perspective, the biggest of all. Policy we can discuss a bit further more. But on your perspective, how should we approach this election, first of all? And secondly, what do you think this election is really about? Is it really about Trump being the best candidate and Biden being the best candidate? Or is there some deeper game being played?
So, first of all, I think everybody has different issues that are important to them. So Donald Trump and Joe Biden are very different. I wrote about this today. I think there's something that's happening right now that's really bizarre, which is both sides are sort of saying, these candidates are actually really alike. The people who are Democrats defending Joe Biden are saying, well, actually, Donald Trump is really old and he forgets stuff too, and his mind is not great either. And people who are Republicans are saying, oh, Joe Biden's immigration policies have just turned into Donald Trump's now, and he realized Donald Trump was right about everything. And it's not true. They're not the same. The age differences and the way they present are very different between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Joe Biden and Donald Trump's immigration policies are really different. Their policies in foreign policy are really different. Their policies on healthcare are really different. So first of all, it matters who you vote for. It matters who the next president is going to be. It will probably impact you in some ways. And I think that's a really important thing to just consider, is that it does matter. A lot of people, I think, right now are very kind of upset with the choices we have. And so there's this fatalism, like, it doesn't matter. We're stuck with these two guys. My vote doesn't matter, whatever. And that's not true. It does. So that's one. In terms of what the election is about, I think one of the things that's really interesting in our country is it's about different things for different political parties and different voters, right? So for Democrats, I think that this election is about the abortion issue. I think it's about defending democracy. I think it's about the idea that Trump is a threat to the global world order and, might come into office and not keep funding Ukraine, and then Putin takes over Ukraine, and then we have a big problem on our hands. So that's going to be what Democrats make this election about. Republicans are going to make it about immigration. They're going to make it about the southern border, the idea that Biden's lost control of the southern border. They're going to make it about the economy, about the fact that Biden oversaw a lot of inflation and that we're still facing inflationary pressures. And they're going to make it about vengeance and kind of retribution, which is what Trump is talking a lot about right now. And this is just the idea that in Trump's 4 years in office, Democrats tried to impeach him twice. They, turned up all this stuff about him in Russia and made him seem like he was a Putin puppet. And then when he left office, they've prosecuted him and charged him with all these crimes. And now they're trying to throw him in jail. And so if he gets into office, he's going to, get payback for that. I mean, he's saying that publicly. He's saying that's his plan. And that's why people should vote for him, is because he's going to right all these wrongs. That's the reality of where it is. I think for different people, those issues matter to different degrees. I think there are a lot of Trump supporters who all they care about is the immigration issue and they think he's better on that, or all they care about is the economy and they think he's better on that. I think there are some Trump voters who just want to see him win so they can get the retribution because they think he's been wronged. I think a lot of Democratic voters just care about the abortion issue and they're going to vote based on that. And then there are people who are all mixed up, and they have to choose which candidate to take, knowing that some of the things they're going to get, they're not going to like, and some of the things they're going to get, they're really going to like. So I think that's going to be how it's framed. And that's going to be what people talk about, is these sort of groupings of separate issues, but it's not the same for both sides. It's different. What the election is about is different depending on which party you're talking to. And I think that's a really important thing to remember.